Good afternoon, everybody. Today's March 16th, 2021. We wanted to give you a quick update on where we think the markets are, what they've done. We call this update the good, the bad, and the ugly. So we'll just jump right into these three charts we want to show you and make our comments. The first is the good. The good is personal income. Now here's 2020, the beginning of 2020. Obviously, COVID hits in March. In fact, we're on the 1 year anniversary of COVID, and we went into recession. These colored sections are recessions. You can see the 08, 09 recession, 2020 recession. But look at this is personal income as reported by the Bureau of Economic Analysis through the St. Louis Fed. You can see personal income, even though we start dipping into recession, and then immediately incomes start to go down. But look, personal income has soared during the recession. Now we know we got a stimulus check and income started dropping back down. We got another stimulus check, income starts. So we really had a soaring personal income overall in 2020, even though we went into very quickly went into a pretty deep recession, knocked a big hole in our national GDP. But we know that, there were lots and lots of efforts to get money out to people and to give financial relief to businesses, etc. So personal incomes, all that translated, personal incomes really went way up in 2020 in the middle of this big recession due to government intervention. So now the bad. So the good, the bad, the ugly. So we just went over the good. Personal income really soared in 2020. The bad. This is a look at margin debt. Now, margin debt is when you borrow money to buy stocks. I like this chart because it shows the stock market in blue. That's the S&P 500, this blue line. And it also shows margin debt. Margin debt occurs when you borrow money to buy stocks, or more precisely, you borrow money against your stocks, most typically to buy more stocks. So borrowed money in the stock market. So let's just go back and look through time when we've had peaks in the red line, that is borrowing money to buy stocks or borrowed money against stocks, margin debt, and this is the price of stocks measured by the S&P 500. So back in 1999, we're going to remember 1999 later in this update, but margin debt starts to go up, stock market's been rising, margin debt's been rising, market starts to fall in August of 2000, and margin debt also falls because people have to reduce their margin as the value of their collateral, that is the stocks that they've put up as collateral. As the stocks go down in value, they have to reduce their margin debt. So it kind of follows a cycle. S&P 500 margin debt building back up, all right? Margin debt peaks in the summer of 2007. The stock market peaks a few months after that, and then stocks start to decline. And again, people have to cover their margin debt. They have to sell stocks. They have to get out. So, here in February, March of 2009, the stock market bottoms. Then the stock market starts rising. Borrowed money against stocks starts to rise. Peaks and margin debt peaks in January of 2018. The stock market peaked several months later. It kind of peaked and went down and then hit a new high several months later towards the end of 2018. And then wham, starts to come down. Now the Fed changed policies right at the end of 2018, which helped bring this down sharply in December of 2018. So as we can see, we have a bit of a difference here. The stock market immediately starts going back up once the Fed changes their policy, and margin debt continues to decline. Then we have COVID. This is 2020. COVID hits, margin debt declines. People are having to do away with margin debt as stock prices fall. We hit a low in stock prices first, and then shortly thereafter margin debt. Then now look at margin debt since the low back a year ago. Wow. And we can see stock prices.
So margin debt is at an all-time high. The stock market is at an all-time high. And margin debt has not started to pull back. The stock market's pulled back maybe just a little bit, although the Dow has recently hit a new high. This is using the S&P 500. So the bad is margin debt really spiking hard here, really spiking hard. And the stock market spiked hard along with it. So that's the bad. The ugly is what a lot of people, there's an indicator called the Buffett indicator, because Warren Buffett is said to use this when deciding how to allocate the money that Berkshire Hathaway has. In other words, he likes to take a look at what are the general price levels in the market as compared to our country's GDP, or gross domestic product, the total output of goods and services in our country. So it's called the Buffett indicator because it said that he looks at this when he's trying to decide what to do with his money. And we can see that at certain times the Buffett indicator has gotten really high. The last time it got really high was 1999, first part of 2000. It peaked at 159.2. We all know what happened. You know, this was a terrible decline in the stock market. Happened after the peak in 1999, 2000. It started coming down in March of 2000. So the Buffett indicator was high. This is a high. It got to its lowest point here in 2007, 8, as we went through the 2000. This is a 2008, 2009 financial crisis. It got very low as the market went down. And then it's since gone up. Remember, this is the value of stocks compared to the GDP. So now we're at 189.5%. Obviously, we've never been this high. The price of financial assets has really gone up, obviously, in the last year or so. And so it makes valuations appear to be extremely high. Now, we have ideas about why that is, but needless to say, just the raw numbers would tell you that, this is at an all-time high, the valuation. And it makes it, when valuations get this high, it becomes very difficult going forward to make, certainly outsized returns. And some people would say even normal returns get harder and harder. And we're going to talk about the Buffett indicator being the ugly. It's at an ugly level right now. And, we've had clients comment to us about, hey, you're being so conservative. We get it, but it's frustrating. And I know that it is frustrating. It's frustrating for us. But we do think valuations are high for a variety of reasons. And I'll just note that a lot of negative things have been said about Mr. Buffett and Mr. Charlie Munger, his right-hand man. They've run Berkshire Hathaway for years and years. They are getting, Mr. Munger is over 90 years old. Mr. Buffett's in his 80s. They are much older now, and a lot of people have, after last year, a lot of people had, some negative things to say about Mr. Warren Buffett, Mr. Charlie Munger, and Berkshire Hathaway. In 2020, Berkshire Hathaway did a little over 2%. It made a little over a 2% return, 2.4% to be exact. So 2020 was not their greatest year, especially in light of the fact that the S&P 500 for 2020, it was up over 15%. It was up 15.75%. So the stock market did 15.75%. Mr. Buffett and Mr. Munger through Berkshire Hathaway did a little over 2%. So compared to the stock market, they didn't do that great. In fact, in his letter last year, the biggest move that Mr. Buffett and Mr. Munger made with Berkshire Hathaway was to buy back their own stock. So that kind of tells you a little bit about where their mindset was, that he can go out and buy a big piece of big companies. They bought back their own stock last year. They returned to their shareholders a little over 2% last year. The stock market did close to 16%. So they underperformed. Now, it's interesting to me to note in 1999, remember this right here, 1999, Mr. Buffett, Mr. Munger, and Berkshire Hathaway had a negative 19.9% return, the stock market did over 21% that year. So in 1999, Mr. Buffett and Mr. Munger looked very bad because of some of the defensive nature of their positions. So they didn't do very well in 1999, especially compared to the market, which was super red hot. However, we know there was a reason they were so defensive. They did very poorly in 1999, kind of unusually poorly for them. Market way up, they were way down. 2020, they did a little over 2%, the market almost 16%. Mr. Buffett and Mr. Munger have history of getting very defensive when this indicator reaches these levels. Now, I say all respect to Berkshire Hathaway, all respect to Mr. Munger, all respect to Mr. Warren Buffett. Anybody that would have a negative take on their investment performance, in my mind, that is misplaced and really not a good take on their performance.
Thank you so much for watching. We hope this was an informative update on how we look at the markets and why we do what we do. As always, if you have any questions or comments or anything, please give us a call. Thank you so much for your business.